All right then. Hello everybody. Welcome to the post-game recap for Iowa's 65-58 loss at home to Kansas State. It sucks. It sucks to lose at home. You're used to Carver Hawkeye being a fortress for this team. You never want to see them lose just because they're a real easy team to get behind. An opportunity for a revenge game against Kansas State team who beat you the year before and you don't take advantage of it. It leaves a bad feeling and, a sad feeling. But I think you also have to be professional, mature in how you handle losing. And I want to take this opportunity to do something I don't think I did justice in my last video after previewing this matchup. I didn't give enough credit to Kansas State and what they were in the lead up to this game, and that's my mea culpa there. That's my bad. Not that I guess my opinion matters in the impact of this game. It's just I feel bad because I didn't give the proper context for what Kansas State was. That's a really good defensive basketball team. I was looking at WarrenNolan.com, his site. He has a couple advanced stats on there. So far through the season, the eighth team in defensive rating in the entire nation, Kansas State. And some of those things can be inflated by early season competition because certain teams play not so good teams and some teams play better teams and makes their stats look worse. But you watch Kansas State in this game, it's like they really showed that ranking's pretty legit. It's a well-structured defense too. It's well thought out. Really good ball pressure. Constantly making things difficult. And the thing about that is, you can afford to play that way when you have a 6'6" center on the back line. She's going to block a lot of shots around the rim. So you can play ultra aggressive out there. But at the same time, I don't even know. They were called for a lot of fouls. I don't really know if they're really fouling that much at points, honestly. But a really well-structured defensive team. I made note of how they had, besides their 6'6" center, the rest of their players were in that 5'11" to 6'1" range. A lot of length and athleticism there, and that really showed. And, well, they didn't necessarily have the best shooting game, neither did Iowa, but their defense really, really gave Iowa fits. It threw Iowa off. Iowa was discombobulated throughout this game, and some of that you can point to Iowa. Iowa has a standard maybe playing better than that, but you do have to credit your opponent. That's a really good Kansas State team we played. And I felt bad looking back and saying I didn't really do that justice in the preview. And if there's any Kansas State fans who are watching this, sorry, I guess I didn't give your team enough credit. You have a really good team. You have reasons to be excited. A very elite defensive squad from what I can tell just from that brief cameo. So I think you want to give a team like that credit. Controlling the pace the way they did. They transformed their pace of play from last year. Last year, they played one of the fastest paces in all of D1 basketball. And this year, they're playing one of the slowest ones. And you expect that when you bring back a 6'6" center into the fold from a knee injury. She's also getting, they made note of it a couple times in the broadcast where she's 4 weeks removed from just starting full contact, full go in practice. So you can tell there are points in time where she's still working her conditioning back up to game shape. And that's partial reason they play so slow. But it's also just you have a 6'6" center, you're going to naturally play that way. But control the pace. It's really the first time where it felt like Iowa wasn't in control of the pace of play in any of our games so far this year. Only 2 fast break points on a Sharon Goodman rim run near the end of the game, which is great hustle, but you would have liked to see more. Not that there weren't, I guess, opportunities throughout the course of the game, and that's part of the discombobulation from Iowa's standpoint. A couple times, honestly, in transition where it's for example, Solke might be wide open, she's in position for a layup, and the pass is just a little bit too high and she can't quite reach and it goes out of bounds. Or one of the guards is in position for a transition layup and they just miss it. A couple things like that, and I think some night, okay, it's Iowa blowing the opportunity, but you have to give credit to Kansas State for throwing Iowa out of the rhythm. Again, I can't really emphasize that enough. That's a really good team Iowa lost to. And I think Iowa fans the ones I've talked to so far today, the day after the game, that I think we acknowledge we can play better, but I think we're handling them maturely. I think we're giving credit to Kansas State from the people I've talked to. I can't speak for everybody online because I imagine there's people saying whatever online, but I try and ignore all that. That was a good Kansas State team we played last year. Not last year and this year, I guess, too. Give them credit for that. But this is an Iowa podcast, so we're going to obviously focus on Iowa's performance throughout the course of this game. And yeah, it's not the performance you would want. So I talked in a couple of the previous videos about, like, okay, it's like no one's really put Iowa in a position where, like, they have to go play at a super slow pace. Most of the teams we played so far have kind of played into the up-tempo pace we want. Not the teams like Virginia Tech didn't challenge us because they're a talented team, but they kind of let Iowa play the way we want. And I'm glad Iowa got an opportunity to play a team like this in November, because you don't want to be in this situation where you're not prepared for a team like this come March, because that's ultimately what matters. The goal for Iowa this year is to win a national title. And you need to play teams with different styles like this to help better prepare you for that. In that case, you can get a lot out of this game for Lisa Bluter and the players. And I'm sure they are going to go over game film extensively and have a lot of takeaways, a lot of things they can look at, a lot of tweaks maybe they can make. Maybe ideas that they didn't show in this game that think, oh, maybe we can try this. Maybe this might be a good solution going forward. And I don't necessarily have those answers. I'm just some guy. They're the Hall of Fame coaches. I think you have to give the coaches time to do their magic. I think rightfully so, all these coaches deserve the benefit of the doubt. The players deserve the benefit of the doubt. They know what they're doing. They're going to give themselves the best chance to win going forward. So I think you got to be patient with it to a certain extent. But it was a great opportunity to play a team who decided to slow the pace down a little bit, play a methodical game, force Iowa offensively to work in the shot clock, force Iowa to work defensively, playing defense late into the shot clock. It gives you some interesting situations to look at. So again, going back to stylistically the way Kansas State plays defense. A lot of ball pressure, trying to get Iowa off the three-point line, and like funneling Iowa's players to Ioka Lee, who's staying camped in the middle lane, looking to either block or alter shots. And for the most part, that strategy is successful. They forced Iowa to work a lot from the mid-range area. And if you look at Iowa's percentages actually from the mid-range area, we actually shot decently well from that area. It was really mostly the three-point line that really let Iowa down. 8 for 17 from the mid-range is a really good percentage. So Iowa was successful in that range. But really the three-point line is really, really what cost Iowa this game. And I think probably a talking point naturally coming out of a game like this is, okay, was Iowa's fourth game. So in 3 of our games so far this year, we've shot under 30% from the three-point line. So obviously some shooting woes to start the year. And 4 games is a decent enough sample size. Like, okay, you can probably start coming to some conclusions maybe at this point, maybe a little bit more time, but you can probably start to have that conversation. Does Iowa have a shooting problem? And honestly, I kind of have a different take on this. Like, I don't think people are necessarily wrong to have questions about whether Iowa has the greatest shooting team. Are we a great shooting team? Are we just a good shooting team? Are we an average three-point shooting team, et cetera? I don't think people are wrong to have that conversation. But honestly, like, my takeaway from this game in terms of the three-point shooting aspect is you took 21 total three-point attempts, and only 5 of those came from players not named Caitlin Clark. And I don't necessarily want to I don't necessarily want to call Caitlin like selfish or anything. I think it was mostly a product of the way that Kansas State was playing defense. But again, really applying ball pressure on the perimeter, really forcing Iowa to drive and make mid-range shots. I think it was really difficult for Iowa to find their shooters. And like, you might say like, okay, is Iowa doing enough offensively to maybe get their shooters free? And honestly, like if you watch the game, like, no, I think Iowa was running a lot of set plays, trying to get players like Caitlin, Gabby, open shots. it was just well covered. And again, give credit to Kansas State. That's a really good defensive team Iowa played. But at the same time, it's like 5 3-point shots for players not named Caitlin Clark. I'm not sure what number exactly Lisa would want from Iowa supporting cast, how many 3-point attempts she would want per game. But I can imagine if I were to ask her, it would be at least 10, double 5. It would be at least double the amount we had in this game. And honestly, I don't think it's a case of even Iowa being passive. Like going through this game, there's really only one time in this game where it's like, oh no, that probably should have been shot. There was a moment when Sid got a ball, got a pass on the left wing corner area, and I think it just wasn't in her shooting pockets, and she wasn't necessarily ready to shoot. So I don't think she just felt comfortable to shoot the ball. She shot the ball a couple possessions later, so I don't think she's hesitant to shoot the ball or anything. It just wasn't the right rhythm in that point in time, which again, Kansas State got us out of our rhythm throughout the course of this game. Credit to them. But I don't think Iowa was passing down shots. I don't think Iowa's shooters were necessarily passive in seeking the shots. I just don't think they were really there. Which has been concerning. It's like, you have to find some ways to get those girls going, because we need Caitlin Clark. We need help for her. Again, she might be the most capable player in all of college basketball in putting a team on her back and carrying the victory. We've seen it before. We're going to see it again this year. But you don't want to be put in a situation where this game happens, I don't know the weekend dates in March 25th or whatever. I don't know the weekend dates in March. But you don't want it to be happening then. Because if it happens then, I mean, there's a real chance that Iowa gets upset. And we're not going to achieve the goals that we want to achieve this year. So I think you have to start to develop some patterns of play to create good shots for your team that isn't necessarily based on playing through Caitlin Clark. And maybe you can get some 3-point shots based on those patterns of play. Maybe drives and kicks, coming off of pin downs or screens or what have you. It felt like Iowa wasn't developing a consistent second pattern of play throughout the course of this game. And there are a couple things that I do want to notice. There are a couple bright spots, but I think the biggest problem that I would have, even amongst those bright spots, is they were really isolated to maybe only a couple plays, or maybe just a quarter. It wasn't like, okay, you got a full half of basketball that you're able to rely on this one play to score, or even the entire game or whatever. There was, in the second quarter, I actually thought Iowa started developing a pattern of play that actually gave us a boost there. So Iowa changed the starting lineup in this game. They substituted in Sid for Molly. And I think that was mainly a product of, hey, K-State has a lot of length and athleticism in the perimeter. Molly would be, she's 5'7", 5'8", something like that. I don't have the official listing off the top of my head. But you can make it like, okay, maybe pregame Molly might be overwhelmed by that size. Let's get Sid in there for also some rebounding help, because she's maybe Iowa's best rebounder at this point, along to combat Ioka Lee. And Iowa won the rebound in this game, both in rebounding margin and rebounding percentage analytically. Iowa won the rebounding battle in this game. So that's a good takeaway that, hey, you can play a team with a lot of size, athleticism, and good post play, and you can still be competitive on the glass and even win the glass. And you know this team gives good heart and hustle. That's not really the question when it comes to this team, heart or hustle. They have that in spades. I don't know if I can even quantify how much they have of that. But getting back to the starting lineup. So again, playing with a four-guard oriented lineup around either a 5, whether it be Stolke, Goodman, or Grady, etc. But Iowa actually decided to change that up in this game. And I actually think it was a really good adjustment in the second quarter. So Iowa went to that 2-post lineup. And why do I think that's relevant? I think it gave Iowa a good mismatch of that 4 position to exploit. So if you were watching the game, and it wasn't necessarily in consecutive possessions, because there were a couple of fast break opportunities in between these possessions, but it felt like from memory there were 3 straight almost half court possessions. Again, not necessarily back to back because there were some transition opportunities in between then, but when Iowa was asked to go up against a set defense in the half court, it felt like 3 straight times we kind of went to this play. So just kind of and I thought this was a really good concept because it got Stolke going downhill. It's nothing too complicated. It's just something okay, something potentially to take a look at. So trying to think. So you often have Caitlin come along the right side of the floor, right here. And you have Stolke at the elbow area, opposite elbow from that. And what you would have is Stolke coming out here. And she didn't receive screen, just making a basic cut to receive the ball. And like curling at the same time, going, like cutting, but like having her momentum kind of going toward the basket. And Caitlin would throw her a pass, and she would set a ghost screen. Now, what's a ghost screen? It's not like a true screen. Like you're not setting a screen with like your feet set and whatever. You're almost just like shooting the gap between the player and her defender. So Hannah receives the ball, let's say this area right here, and her defender is right here, and Caitlin's defender is right here. What you're having Caitlin doing when you're having a ghost screen is just having her run through here, not setting a screen, just running through there and going to the left wing. And the thing about this is Caitlin's defender, she's not going to leave Caitlin Clark open from anywhere on the floor because that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So she's not going to help defend Stolke in this action because she's going to be really focused on trying to help Caitlin Clark. And so what this action does is it creates a gap here between Hannah's defender and her, and that gives her space, and she's already curling, to go downhill, and there were several possessions in a row, I think 3 if I counted correctly, where she got downhill going to her right and was able to score or make an effective play. And that was an interesting pattern of play, I thought. And the nice thing about, like, again, putting Hannah at the 4 position is she doesn't have to drive on someone like Ayoka Lee, 6'6". She's probably going to get that shot blocked more often than not. And I believe it was Gabby Gregory for Kansas State who was guarding Hannah Stolke a lot in this action. And she's got good size for a guard, but she's not able to compete with Hannah in that way. So I thought this was a really effective just pattern of play. It's like, okay, you're getting Stolke going downhill, getting her going to the rim, and like having her score. But the problem again with that is, like, I talked about like consistency and finding that. It was really just isolated to that stretch in the second quarter. And I think that's the disappointing thing. I think I saw some stuff developing throughout Iowa for the course of this game, but it was just like sporadic. It wasn't like something like you saw necessarily throughout the course of this game. And you saw at times like, okay, like Iowa would get Hannah the ball in that same kind of elbowish area. And I don't know if she's just not looking to score necessarily. Maybe she was just like looking to get other people involved at that point in the game. But it just didn't feel like there was that same aggression in trying to go that way later in the game, which is disappointing because I think that was a really good adjustment by Lisa to find that mismatch for Hannah in that matchup. But it's just kind of something that Iowa went away from to a certain extent. And I don't want to go too crazy pointing fingers. I'm assuming it's just a case like Hannah's still at that point where she's still trying to get comfortable as a scorer and getting that scoring mindset. I think that's something that this team could probably use a little bit too, which again is why it's kind of sporadic. Like, you really need that second player to have that constant aggressive mindset. Like, hey, I know Caitlin Clark is great. She's amazing. She's going to pretty much accomplish everything there is to accomplish in basketball. Maybe not like an NCAA championship or an NBA championship, but every individual honor, she's going to achieve that in basketball. So you want to give her opportunities. You want to give her the ball, but you don't want to begin like defer to that. You have to take your opportunities when they're there. And it just felt like, okay, a little bit more aggression. And she's, again, I imagine that's going to be a point of us like, hey, we need you. The coach is going to probably say, hey, we need a little bit more for you. And hopefully we'll see Hannah step up. She's certainly capable. And the other thing I'll also say, I guess, in that action, there is also a potential, like, a lot of teams are probably going to like back off of her because while she's making progress as a shooter, still developing someone as a shooter, not necessarily a knockdown. So like, it might not be the most reliable way of playing just because they might play off of her and give her that shot. But as long as she's consistently attacking that player, just playing off her, like, she's still going to be able to score most power forwards, players who play the 4 position in college basketball. She's going to be able to score over most of those kind of players. And it's something I kind of was hoping to see from her a little bit more as the game went on. And hopefully, once that's on film, once I see that, hopefully we can start seeing in our two-post lineup, hopefully start seeing more from Hannah offensively, because I think she's a really capable offensive player, particularly scoring around the rim. And just another thing also you would say, and gosh golly, like Molly Davis was just amazing in that fourth quarter. Like that was a really, like I feel so bad because, man, it's like you really want that kind of performance from Molly to result in a win. She was amazing. Normally like when I give out my game ball awards, like I don't necessarily want it to only be based on who had the most points, who had the most rebounds, whatever. It's also kind of like a feel thing, like who just impacted the game winning the most. And honestly, like just think out loud, it's like, man, the way she played in the fourth quarter, I will probably give her the game ball because like that was incredible. And it's exactly what Iowa needed. Again, Ayoka Lee sitting in that paint, you can't get all the way to the rim, and they're taking away the three-point line, Kansas State. They're forcing to drive the ball. And like that floater game was like, pretty much exactly what Iowa needed. Caitlin had some success in mid-range, but Molly was really cooking well in the mid-range game. That floater game was incredible. But at the same time, going back to consistency in our patterns of play, I don't believe she had a point outside of the fourth quarter. And while that fourth quarter is drop your jaw amazing, it was really good. Just great play from Molly. You still want to see more throughout the course of the game in that way, impact in that way. And I think this is another situation where I kind of want to offer a little bit of a mea culpa. So again, with the starting lineup change, that was kind of something I maybe suggested. I believe it was in the Virginia Tech video where I maybe suggested putting Sid in for Molly. And this is not an indictment on Sid. She had a pretty good game. She hustled. She's a great player in her own right. But thinking about how it fits into how this team plays, I think I was wrong to suggest probably that Sid go in the lineup for Molly. Again, like she provided rebounding help in this game, which you need because rebounding is obviously vital to winning. But at the same time, it's like you bring someone like Molly off the bench, and maybe Molly might be better scoring off the bench, but maybe if you get her in that starting lineup and get her in that mindset of being that second option more consistently, maybe she would have shown some of that aggression earlier in the game, and maybe that would have just taken some of the stress off Caitlin Clark, so it just didn't feel like she had to do anything. Because I think part of the problem is like when things get tough, like Caitlin sometimes feels like she has to do everything, and she just really doesn't. Again, she's capable of doing it, but again, like just not enough looks outside of that. Outside of Caitlin Clark, unfortunately, in this game. And maybe getting Molly back in that starting lineup will help like ease like things going throughout the course of the game. And it might save Caitlin, like both take that mental and physical toll off of her throughout the course of the game so that she's more rested to perform like she needs to in the fourth quarter. And it might get Molly going more consistently throughout the entire course of the game if she has that mindset from the very start, instead of just necessarily at the end of the game. It's great that she did what she did at the end of the game. It damn near won Iowa the game. But you would like to see it more consistently throughout the course of the game. And again, I think the coaches, they're probably going to look at putting Molly back in the starting lineup, if I had to guess, because she legitimately earned it, by the way. She played in the fourth quarter. I assume that's what they're going to do. I will also say, and like, again, this isn't really a criticism of the coaching staff. I think this is just the reality of when you have a new team. So if you count exhibition games, we played 6 games so far. And in those 6 games, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4 different starting lineups. Again, like you've had the same starting lineup these past couple years, and you just kind of know what you're getting out of that group. They know how to play off each other. You know exactly what you need from them. You know the changeup that you necessarily need off the bench when maybe that starting lineup needs a little bit of help. You know the changeup that's necessary to get things going. You still get the impression like, okay, the coaching staff is still going through the process of figuring out this team, which is natural when you have a new team. I don't think that's even really a criticism. And again, they're Hall of Famers. Like, they're great. You gotta give the Hall of Fame coaches the chance to work through things. And it might take a while, but like I think every Iowa fan watching this completely trusts them to come to the best conclusion. I know I do, so I'm not worried about that. But you still get the impression that Iowa's still working through things and what they're trying to do. And again, they could just be changing their starting lineup game by game just based on opponent. But I don't know. It's like I'm kind of the philosophy. You kind of want your set five, and then if you need to make any changes, you can make those changes in game. But I kind of think the coaches would probably prefer to have a set five to turn to every game, and I'm probably the same mindset. But we'll see. We're a great team. We should expect to go far. But again, there's going to be some kinks working throughout the year, and you got to give the players and coaches time to work through those kinks. I think that's only fair to them. But anyway, gosh golly, it's also just, you can kind of tell it's just like, I won't say that necessarily Iowa doesn't trust post play, because I really thought Iowa's post play really excelled against UNI, and UNI has a pretty good Missouri Valley front line for a Missouri Valley team. So I don't think Iowa's post play is necessarily subpar. I just think Iowa's kind of shying away from using the post when they're going against players like Lee and Kitley, which I think is logical. I mean, they're giants. They tower over us. But it just feels like, okay, it's like Iowa needs to start developing some patterns of play to maybe open up things so that other players can make more of an imprint on the game and start freeing up Caitlin Clark and start freeing up some of our shooters. Again, it's going to be a work in progress. What else did I want to touch on? And just discombobulated in general. I do want to shout out this. It's one of the more ludicrous, in a good way, passes you'll see from Caitlin Clark, and it's a real shame because I forget who missed the layup at the end of the half, but they missed it short. But like, this is just such a ludicrous pass. So near the end of the half, again, Kansas State did a really good team, really applies ball pressure well. They were able to take away Caitlin's step back three, going to her right, and Caitlin takes that step back. It's well contested. She then pivot steps through the defense and throws a perfect one-handed pass with her right hand between two defenders. There was a defender fronting the post player and a defender behind the post player. It's like, and it's a perfect pass right to where they need to go up and score. And they missed the layup, which you'd like to have that back in a close game like this, but it's like, man, it's like that was such a that's a stupid good pass, man. It's like, oh my Lord, that was amazing. I was just like, good Lord. Like, but at the same time, like, there's that discombobulation. It's like, there's an opportunity to take advantage of, and it's just like a great play in some ways made. It's just a missed layup. And there's multiple opportunities throughout the course of this game where it felt like, man, it's like that pass was a little off, that shot was a little off. It just never felt like Iowa had their rhythm, which is unfortunate. So just thinking about now, I guess, what I saw defensively. Again, it's nice to see us win the rebounding battle, particularly against a player like Lee. In terms of like how we defend in the post, again, one of the nice things, again, when we played Virginia Tech and Kitley, what we were able to do is really get her off the spot. And again, this is partially because Kitley likes to operate in the mid-range, where Lee is a player who likes to operate in the paint. I had people complaining that like maybe for operating the paint for longer than 3 seconds last night, but I won't say too much about that. I wasn't necessarily counting in my head in those situations. But she was able to establish deep post position, unlike Kitley again when we played Virginia Tech, and it's kind of to be expected because big, strong girl. That's a tough cover for Iowa. And Kansas State did a really good job of just like throwing it to her where she could catch the ball high and keep it high and then finish right away. They're a really good post-feeding team. They would drive like to the middle of the paint and just like throw up a little lob pass at times, right to exactly where it needed to be for a quick finish. So she didn't have to bring the ball down. She didn't have to make any moves. And just even their post passing from the perimeter is like no, they're a great post feed team. And there were a couple of good deflections where it's like, okay, like that was good defense on Iowa's part to almost take the ball away. But again, when you have a big target like that, it's hard to consistently get your hands on those high lob passes. And again, Iowa was rotating their centers, again, because you can tell, and again, the announcers made note of the fact that Lee was getting tired because she's still working her way back from an injury. So Iowa was trying to rotate their centers to keep fresh legs to help run the floor against her and help play defense on her. And I think it was mostly a struggle keeping her in the lane. I don't think anyone was necessarily perfect at doing so. I will say I thought O'Grady was the player who was most consistent at getting Ioka Lee's feet out of the restricted arc, getting her feet out of the paint. Generally, when I noticed that Lee was taking a shot from that wasn't either a layup or whatever, it was generally when Addie was guarding her. So I do want to give a shout out to Addie. I thought she probably played the best defensive game of all three centers. And I think we played our three centers relatively evenly. Just to keep fresh legs. I thought I would shout out Addie O'Grady's defense. I thought it was pretty good, honestly, given the matchup. There were a couple moments where Ioka got her, but that's to be expected when you're playing against an objectively good player. But it's hard to... But again, those post players, a lot of times, they were on islands, and you can't really help on the posts there because when you're catching the ball that deep, it's just a turn and a layup for a good player like that. I will say there's a couple times when Iowa got caught cheating maybe a little bit too much, trying to double on the post. There was like one time when like I saw Sid do it, and one time when I saw Hannah do it, where it's like they're cheating a little bit too much to the post even before Ioka received the ball or whatever. And what Kansas State did is they're a smart team. They saw that, okay, we're over helping a little bit too early on our post trap, so they just like found whoever the doubler was defending, and they were able to make a play out of that a couple times. Again, it's a really tough cover trying to stop Lee. It's hard to double a player like that. It is just really hard, and a couple times when we tried to get caught cheating a little bit too early, they made us pay a few times. So yeah, I will once again shout out. I said this a little bit earlier, I guess a little bit ago, I guess, that Sid made a mistake over helping a little bit too much on one post feed, but that doesn't take away from the fact that she was really great again in a lot of ways defensively. Really active, great on the boards per usual, getting on the floor, getting steals. Again, just the kind of typical Sid Outfilter performance you expect. Not that it was perfect or anything. I don't think any of Iowa's players would necessarily call their performance perfect. They're all perfectionists, I'm sure, and they probably focus more on their mistakes than their great plays. Although they all made good plays at various moments. But again, you like seeing that hustle from Sid. You just kind of expect it at this point. It's nice to see. We threw our zone at them a couple. This is probably like going back through Iowa's film, and Iowa played a lot of zone in garbage time against UNI. But honestly, other than that, we've mostly been playing just straight up man-to-man or player-to-player defense, whatever you're used to calling it. But this is probably the first time we've actually played zone defense when there's actually been game pressure, when the game's actually been in doubt. And I think it was generally effective at kind of throwing Kansas State off of their rhythm, from what I remember. But I wouldn't necessarily say it stood out. I don't remember Ioka getting the ball in those situations, which again I think was the main priority. Is just like, let's just make sure that she's not able to get the ball, because I guess it's something kind of noted that Kansas State, they shoot a lot of threes. They're not necessarily the best shooting team. It's probably the one thing that might give them some hiccups this year. Do they have the shooting around Ioka to necessarily score as many as they want to? Their defense is something you're going to have to rely upon a lot. But yeah, I don't really think, like, there's not really too much critically to say about the defense, other than maybe I think Iowa got caught overhelping too much in the post sometimes. I think for the most part, Iowa held up individually at times. Yeah, I don't know if there's that much to say. A lot of the focus is going to obviously be on the offense in this game. So anyway, I do want to still give out a defense/hustle player of the game award. It's kind of between O'Grady or Sid to me. I'm still going to give it to Sid. Made a lot of plays, a lot of key hustle plays to give us an opportunity to win. So I think that's fair to give her that shout out. But I still do want to give a shout out to O'Grady. I thought she did a good job of pushing Ioka off her spots in this game. And in terms of the game ball, as I said earlier, you have to give to Molly Davis. That was a hell of a fourth quarter performance. You would like to see that, again, throughout the course of the game. And I think that's something we might see going forward. But I don't think you can take away that fourth quarter was really good. And what Iowa needed to give us a chance to win, it just wasn't quite enough. But again, the nice thing about a performance like that is you really hope it gives her the confidence to take that going forward. There's value in that. Yeah. It is nice to see her get going, though, because she has struggled a little bit to start the season, but she's shown this game why she's capable and why she wasn't starting lineup beforehand. But now I guess it's time to turn the page. It's just one game out of 30 or so, however many there are. I forget off the top of my head. And there's some teams like UConn or South Carolina who are capable of going undefeated. I don't think Iowa's probably there as a program where they can just go undefeated against whoever they play. Though we're object to a really great program, and honestly, maybe at some point in the future we might get to the point where we're capable of going undefeated, but we're still a little bit of ways away from that point. But if we keep recruiting well, that might be possible. But anyway, I guess turning the page to the Drake Bulldogs, because that's certainly a test for Iowa. It was, I believe, an overtime game last year. So it's kind of interesting looking at the history of Iowa versus Drake over the course of Lisa's tenure. A lot of success, which is a little bit surprising, but also not surprising, I guess, because of what Iowa's done these past 2 decades or so. But it's a little surprising because you really have a lot of respect for what Drake is as a women's basketball program. They've only beaten Lisa 3 times ever since Lisa took the helm at the U. 2 of those wins came in Lisa's first 2 years. So, I mean, you're talking about, like, what was that? She came here, like, what? The 2000-2001 season, somewhere there, if I believe. So if you look back at the 20 years of this rivalry's history, they've won 1 time. It was a couple years ago. But despite that record, I mean, make no mistake about it, there's been plenty of close affairs in this series. I don't think any Iowa fan should feel comfortable that you can just, like, walk in there and just blow out Drake. They're going to give a fight. So just kind of like looking at what Drake is, it's just kind of interesting. This is something I thought I would make note of. So a site that you'll probably hear me reference a fair amount in my comings and goings on this channel is shotquality.com. So what this site measures, it doesn't measure like your shooting percentages, how many threes you necessarily make per game, how many layups you necessarily make per game, how many free throws or whatever you make per game. What shot quality measures is the quality of the shots that you take. How wide open are your three-point attempts? How contested are your three-point attempts? How many layups are you getting per game? How many contested shots from, say, 17 feet are you taking? It takes all that into account. And it's kind of an interesting resource. There's some paid components to shotquality.com, but there's a team standing component that's completely free that anyone can look at. And just one thing I just kind of noticed looking at Drake is they have the number one the number one rim and three rate in the entire country. Now, what does that mean? Rim shots, layups, in men's basketball would be dunks, but in women's basketball, just purely layups. And three-point rate is how many threes you take per game. And Drake is number one in that stat. So pretty clearly a team that very much takes that professional approach that a lot of professional teams do, that analytical approach where they just don't want to shoot mid-range twos. This is something to keep in mind. A lot of threes, and that's just something I think most people know about. Yeah, where do they rank? Amongst the top 5% of all women's college basketball teams in three-point attempts per game. So they're going to get those three-point attempts up. They don't do a lot of damage in the paint. They only get 37% of their points from the paint area. That's way near the bottom of D1 basketball. And they play at a really fast pace, again, which I kind of like. The slow pace that Kansas State wanted to play at, it doesn't really suit Iowa. And I'm glad Iowa got an opportunity to play a slower game because I think it'll allow Iowa to make adjustments going forward when we play teams like that. But the good news is I think Drake is going to be more willing to play at the kind of pace where you and I and Virginia Tech were, where they're going to try and run with Iowa to an extent. I assume, unless they decide to change things up, but given that they're that's 80 possessions per game is pretty damn high. So just noting other things. It's just kind of interesting, and this is something, if you look back at the box score from last year's game, is also something to note of. Drake is extremely turnover prone. They get a lot of assists, but they're also extremely turnover prone. They had 23 turnovers in the game last year versus Iowa, and that's ultimately, if you really look at the stats in that box score from last year's game, that's why Iowa won. We had 15 more shot attempts than Drake did. So even though Drake shot a better percentage than we did in that game, how many turnovers did Iowa have? 11, so 12 fewer turnovers. It's going to be hard to beat a team like that, like Iowa, if you have 12 more turnovers. And I think that's going to be a key for Iowa. For not just because Drake tends to turn the ball over a lot, but also because they rank very highly in steals per game. Their point guard had 6 steals versus ISU in their win versus them in Des Moines. They also get a lot of blocks. They kind of rotate their 6'3" center out of the game and try and go to opt for more shooting, from what I can tell. But she's blocking 2 shots per game and not in around 20-ish minutes per game. And they're amongst the top in the nation just block rate right now. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Is Iowa going to look to try and play through the post against a player like that? Are we going to try and play that post player off the floor and try and get Drake to go to a more guard-oriented lineup? Because if we do, I think we'll start feasting, whether it be Hannah, Sharon, or Addie in the post. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. What's Drake's approach in terms of playing their 6'3" center and relying on her to score and in the paint or block shots? Because she does shoot threes, but below 30%. It's not something you would really worry about on the surface. And do they opt to go for more shooting to try and just outscore Iowa? Just kind of looking, is there anything else that really stands out? Generally, they don't attack the offense glass, looks like, but they rebound the ball defensively pretty well. Again, very fast-paced team, get a lot of points in the fast break. If I had to guess, the team who wins the turnover battle is probably going to win this game because while Iowa isn't always super turnover prone, we do occasionally have games where sometimes ball pressure gets to us a little bit too much and we have a high turnover game. This game against Kansas State was kind of one of those, although Kansas State didn't try and push in transition to take advantage of those turnovers. Kansas State only had 4 transition points, so But yeah, be ready to guard the 3-point line pretty clearly. And be ready to take care of the ball because they're going to be coming after us in that way. And yeah, about what you expect size wise. A couple players around 6 foot. Their guards are generally a little bit smaller than what Iowa has. So they don't have necessarily length or athleticism. They bother us on the perimeter. Maybe we'll have an easier time getting our shots off because we really do need to get our shooters involved more. Like you can say the shooters didn't necessarily shoot well, but if the supporting cast only took 5 3-point shots, like that's just not enough. Like, even if they went over 5, that's still just not enough. They need more shooting volume to make an impact on the game. And hopefully Iowa can get them going in this game because it's going to be a more free-flowing game, I'm sure of. But certainly a tough test. But I think you feel confident that, hey, this team, I imagine Iowa's a little ticked off. You never like to lose at home. And you know they're going to come out with the right mentality and looking to win. I would feel comfortable with a comeback. I don't think comeback's the right word. A bounce back win. Yeah, that's probably the more correct term in this case. I'd be looking for a bounce back for Iowa Sunday. And again, this game sucks because you want the best for those ladies, but it is just one game, and I think you take it and you just learn from it. And I'm sure Iowa will learn from this experience versus Kansas State. But anyway, I think that's really all I have to say. So I'll see y'all later.